for me, satsang is quite a strange form. I've never gone to much satsangs or anything, particular because then the teacher is sitting up front and the rest of the people are grouped around it, and it gives me always the impression like this is the person who knows, you know, and honored and revered for it, and these are all the people who wanting to know, and you know, if you then later on find for yourself what it's all about, I think that specific formation is actually a bit strange, according to that we all are what we are already. So how do you see that?
Yeah, I understand how it can seem strange, but first of all, my message has always been about not knowing, and that's misunderstood by people who come again and again until it is understood or recognized. Because as you say, people come with the idea that the person at the front of the room knows and that they don't know, and that there's something wrong about not knowing, that they should actually know. And they project that knowing onto the person at the front of the room. So my role as the person at the front of the room or the teacher is to keep saying, I don't know, it's okay not to know. In fact, it's all about not knowing. So if you don't know, great. And this is quite difficult for people to hear, actually. They don't want to often hear that, because actually it's easier to keep projecting onto the teacher that they know, because it means that it keeps them small and in a sense of, there's something wrong with me, and it's a comfort zone. That although it's painful actually to live with that, it's somehow familiar for most people.
And it gives you a future, it gives you a goal.
Yeah.
Like I want to reach that.
Yes, but it's a goal that they never want to actually reach, although they keep saying that they want to reach it, but they never actually want to reach it, because reaching that means a coming full circle back to where they are actually. And admitting and acknowledging that this is it, and they don't really want that, because it means giving up the future goals, the dreams. So it is a strange dynamic, for sure. It's a paradoxical dynamic, because yes, the message is that nobody knows, and it's okay, that it's all as it is. It's also a message of no separation, and yet there's the separation apparently of the person at the front of the room and then the people in the audience. Right, yeah. But there, in the play of this human life in the world, you know, it's impossible really to point to no separation in the play of separation. So any format is going to have some play of separation in it. So if you can take the play of separation lightly and see that, we use the format of the person at the front of the room and the audience to point beyond that format, you know, and if people can see that actually it's a role. I'm playing the role of the person at the front of the room, and you're playing the role of the people listening, and we're all playing this game to facilitate a waking up to what is beyond this game. And it seems that format facilitates it often quite well.
I see. So,
you know. So it's a paradox. You know. It's hard to really understand it, but it works mostly.
And another question I was curious about is, you know, I can't remember actually reading the word enlightenment in your book. Not at all, I think. Not at all. Was that on purpose, that you don't mention the word?
I'm not really interested in some future goal of enlightenment. I never have been. You know, when I was searching for the truth or to wake up or whatever, I was searching only to know what is real, what is true. And that's still the case. I mean, I'm following what is real, what is true. And the word enlightenment somehow sounds so big and flashy and in the future, and you have to be really special and very spiritual, and you can't be just an ordinary human. Whereas my message is really about living as this ordinary human in the world. I'm a mother. I'm very down to earth, ordinary in a sense. And yet at the same time, the spirituality that I'm pointing to is very much available for everybody, because it's who we are already.
Exactly.
It's not about becoming some superhuman.
Yeah. How would you say that knowing who you are helps you in living in this world?
Well, that's about. You're asking me to answer the question of the whole book in a way.
Well,
but well, as the book is called "The Courage to Come Alive," it is about courage, and I speak about courage throughout the book, and what I mean by courage is that when you recognize the truth of who you are. In a way, that's the easy bit, although it can also seem challenging and it can bring up fear and everything else as well. But yeah, it's the most fundamental, basic recognition. But then the living of it is where you're challenged with all kinds of daily challenges in your relationships, work, family, or whatever, all kinds of areas. And the thinking, when you recognize the truth of who you are, you recognize that actually you are not who you think you are. Right? You are not the story of me. But it doesn't mean that those stories of me just disappear. So in your daily life, they may be triggered.
Even more so, maybe.
Yes, it could be, yeah.
At least that's what I experienced, yeah.
Okay, yeah. Well, so they get triggered, but then the knowing of who you are means that you can see more and more, it's a process, more and more that you are not what you think. So each time one of these identities of the thinking comes up, it is seen by the truth of who you are, that awareness, or whatever word we put to it, that it's not me, actually. It's not really who I am. And it's not that it disappears, but that it's embraced, actually. It's embraced, it's welcome to be here, but it's also seen to not be the boss. It's not in charge. It's not the truth. And it takes courage to keep seeing that, to keep acknowledging that I'm not what I think in the midst of your daily challenges and triggers and power struggles and whatever is going on in your life. So it's a constant honoring the truth of who you are and seeing that I'm not what I think. So actually it's about readdressing the balance between who you are as life itself, the truth, and the thinking. Whereas before, the thinking has been taken to be so important and in charge, and then the truth was kind of put down there like it's unimportant, and that balance shifts, and more you see that the thinking is a practical tool. It's not bad, it's not the enemy or something to be pushed away, but it doesn't have some ultimate knowledge. So then the thinking is seen to be less important, and the truth of who you are, that not knowing, that actually living from there, you don't know how to live, but living happens.
Living happens, yes.
And it happens by itself.
Yes. What I meant with maybe things get somehow permission to come up more than before. They weren't allowed at all to be seen. And
yes, if you're trying to be more spiritual or something.
Or whatever, you have as an image of yourself. And we're able to keep that despite all the voices saying, something not right here. But there can also be a disappointment in, again, this voice saying, well, you've seen who you are, you know this, and why on earth do you still behave like that or make that type of a decision or anything?
Yes.
So that's what I meant. It can even be more.
Yes, in a way, all the cover-ups,
Exactly.
the protection layer is seen to, well, I can't really hide behind that because it's just actually thought. It's not more substantial than that. So then, more raw layers come up to be seen and to play out.
Yeah. Of which you mention all these things like family, work, and in the book, and giving examples of your personal life.
Yes.
And how that was for you, and how it can help other people to go through a similar process of their own, of course. Courage, could you say a bit more about courage, since your book has the title Courage? The word courage is probably, if you do a word count on it, the most used word. So it does have a deep meaning for you.
Yes. Actually, courage, I never really considered courage to be really a big part of this awakening process until probably about, 5-6 years ago, something like that, maybe a bit more. When it really hit me that, it's really about courage and continuing courage, not just once. And I was inspired to speak and to write about courage, particularly by a good friend of mine. I mentioned him in the beginning of the book, Siddhartha, who he was quite a character and very courageous. And just hanging out with him, and he died also about a year before my husband died. So I actually learned courage from both of these two wonderful men, that inspired the courage in me, in two different ways. Siddhartha was very courageous in the way he acted, the way he spoke out. He was very provocative, and whereas my husband Robert was more courageous in terms of the heart, in terms of feeling and expressing what he felt. And both types of courage are actually what I talk about in the book. But sometimes courage for one person is nothing for the other, So sometimes for one person, an act of courage is something so small for somebody else, such a tiny little thing that isn't a risk at all. So it really depends on each individual unique journey, what requires courage in your life.
That's true. And yet also I remember that you mentioned in your book, courage is what we are.
Yes.
So
yes.
that stood out for me.
Yeah, essentially it is our true nature. So it's not about trying to be courageous or trying to be tough or strong. It is about seeing again that the thinking is not the truth. And it's the thinking that says, oh, I couldn't possibly do that, or I couldn't possibly express that, or it's too frightening to admit that to myself, or the thinking is putting up these barriers, protecting. So it has a good intention, but it stops. It seems to stop the flow of life in the expression, in the lived experience.
That's right.
And so when we keep seeing that I'm not what I think, then there is natural courage. So there's no need to try to have the attitude of being courageous, because that's more thinking. But to see, I'm not this, I'm not this, I'm not this, whatever the thinking says, then you're just left with a raw courage.
Would you say it's like being faithful to what you know is true or see is true, whatever verb you would use.
Standing in the fire of the truth. Burning up in that, no matter what thought might say about it or what circumstances come and go.
Yeah.
It's one of those words a little bit like love or God, where you could interpret it in so many different ways, and of course every word is wrong, So we just, I'm using many words in the book, but I say right from the beginning that actually every word is wrong, so that's take them lightly.
Yeah.
So the word truth. It sounds like it comes with the opposite, with what is false, and as if there is one truth and then what is not true is false. And I don't mean that kind of truth. I mean ultimate truth, and that is, what is beyond what we think, or what we think is true or false.
Even that what's a wordless, or that what doesn't have a name.
Yes.
Yeah.
In the way I work with people in meetings or retreats, I'm constantly changing the words to suit what people resonate with, because it's really not about the words. So with some people the word truth might resonate, and I go through phases where I might use that word more, and then another phase where I'm resonating, or the people I'm working with are resonating with a different word, so then I change it,
That's right, yeah, of course.
It's got to stay alive.
Absolutely, and just be with whatever is presented to you in that moment, yeah. There was one bit in your book that really struck me, and it's about compassion. If you don't mind, I would read a bit from it.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's already quite further in the book, actually near the end. And the title was "Compassion is Not Caring," which of course is a title that stands out. You think, what? So, and the example you give here is from your personal life, and you write, "When we were in India a few years ago, I was in the river Ganga swimming near the shore with a friend. My son, who was 1.5 at the time, was playing on the beach. He didn't want to go in the water because he found it too cold, but he was playing, putting his feet in and then running out. I was watching him and at the same time having a conversation with my friend. At a certain point I looked away from my son to respond to a question, and then about 2 seconds later, when I turned around, my son was floating face down in the water next to me. In that moment there was no time, and in that timeless moment I looked at my son floating there and I didn't care. I could not have done anything. It was perfectly okay for him to be there, but at the same time I felt the adrenaline rush and terror, and I found myself grabbing his foot and pulling him up and out until we were sitting on the beach together. He had got a bit of a fright, but was absolutely fine. It had obviously only just happened, and he had not been under the water for longer than a second or two. But although he was fine, I sat on the beach holding him and crying from the shock of it. This paradox of totally not caring and at the same time absolutely caring and being moved passionately to act is something that thought cannot process or understand." And then you go on and beyond the example, you say, "True compassion comes from not caring." It sounds like a contradiction, but like this, it is clean. Whatever you do or don't do does not come from believing that it will mean something about you. Well, and you go on and saying how it is for you. Of course I thought, when I read it first. And then I immediately realized that if you would care from any personal point of view, it would be smudgy
Yeah.
caring, and it would. And I mean, I took this out because the world as it is now, as the disasters and the horrors of what is happening to so many people, compassion is a daily question to me, and my indifference to some messages, my deep caring to others, compassion is sort of daily in the air. How am I being with compassion in this world? So could you say a bit more about it?
Yeah, it does sound like a complete contradiction, this title, and I can understand how it would be shocking to read it. But it is, when you're trying to be kind or compassionate or helpful or good, essentially you're doing it out of a motivation for me, to get something for me, to get love, to get to be liked, accepted, and so actually the truth is that you don't really care in that moment about whatever it is that you're, or whoever you're helping or being kind to. You're doing it for yourself. And there's nothing wrong with that, but I'm just highlighting the truth of it, let's be honest. And it's perhaps not always as clear-cut as that. So it's perhaps often a mixed motivation, but it is often also the motivation for me. And real compassion, I would say, it doesn't come from any trying to be nice or good or compassionate. It doesn't come from an attitude. When we are admitting honestly that I don't care, that actually the world, people, my son even, and that's of course very close to my heart, that actually beyond the play of this person in the world and how I relate to everything and everyone, that actually it's all fine as it is. When I really see that, then it means that actually I'm open up. I open up to feeling, to being touched, and then to be moved naturally to take action or not. So I may find myself taking action in an area that I don't have any idea about or attitude or sense that that this person needs help, but I just find myself moving in that direction. And if it happens to help somebody, well, bonus. Right. I'm not trying, because also if we see, if we put a label on somebody or some situation that they need help, then we're actually putting a limit. We're putting a label on that person. We're making them small, and then we make ourselves big and very important. I'm someone who can help, and it becomes a kind of power game. And I actually don't know whether anyone or anything or the world needs my help. I don't know that. I surrender. I let me be moved by life, or not, to help or not, to support or not, to be, compassionate in whatever way, or not. I'm not in charge in the thinking. My thinking, this me story is not in charge of when I do or don't do. And that is really a challenge. If you've been brought up to be a good person, by perhaps a Christian, religious, Jewish upbringing, that you should be a good person, you should always help people. It's challenging. And it doesn't mean that you shouldn't help. It's not that you should swing to the opposite extreme and just, I don't care. It's not an attitude of not caring. But it's just acknowledging that beyond it all, it's fine. And when it's really fine, you're admitting that actually, even if the whole world is falling apart and that there are terrible disasters and people are suffering, that it's really okay as it is. And this is not an attitude of passivity. You can still act if you're moved to act, but then it comes from a clean place where you're moved rather than thinking you should.
That's right. I'm thinking of that poem of what is this woman poet from a long time ago. She says these arms coming from the space, they're the arms of God. So not my arms, Karin's arms, but so they do. Yeah, they move, they act from that place.
And one more thing about that is that also the attitude of trying to be compassionate or good or kind actually acts as a kind of protection layer from actually stopping life, letting life in. So you are protecting yourself from really being touched by the pain of what's happening in the world, for example, or to other people. If you're trying to help, you don't have to really feel the pain, the heartbreak of everything that's happening. And knowing that actually, in many cases, not always, but in many cases, we are helpless to do anything about it.
So you could also say not caring and deeply caring is actually the same thing.
It's one and the same thing. It's just not the attitude of caring.
Yes. Which is a challenge in these times, and courage then to borrow your word.
Again, it comes back to courage.
Yes.